Hey, good afternoon, folks. My name's Jeff Kinney. I'm with the Abilene Fire Department. I'm here today to give y'all some information on fire prevention, the components of the program, why it's crucial that we have a good program in place to not only protect the business owners, but the community as a whole. Just want to start out with a brief question. Is anybody aware of the components that are in fire prevention? Anybody got any questions or, ideas of what we actually look at when we're developing a fire prevention program? Well, yeah, that's correct. We do need to educate our folks. Uh, yes, we do need to have inspections. So to delve down into it a little bit more, when we create a fire prevention program, what we're looking at is three main components, and it's engineering, it's code enforcement and inspections, and it's public education. So if we start with engineering, just real briefly, we're looking at everything that's involved in a structure within our city, from the buildings to the contents, the suppression systems, the water supply that feeds those systems, the alarm systems. Do we have access? Are we able to get to that structure if a fire were to occur? And is that adequate so that we can get there quickly enough before it escalates and either destroys the entire facility or spreads to an adjacent facility? They're Are they compliant with their codes? That's a big one. And essentially, when we're looking at all those things and reviewing those plans and going over those items, what we're doing is making sure that anybody that's an occupant in that building is safe. Okay, then we go on to code enforcement. And again, that's to make sure that the public and any member that's in that structure, including yourselves in this building that we're having this meeting in today, um, that an inspection is performed and any of those deficiencies are identified and that they're rectified, prior to a potential event occurring. And then lastly, we want to educate people, which is exactly what the purpose of today's meeting is. That education is to teach y'all, promote you, make you aware of potential fire hazards or structural issues or things that could potentially lead to a fire. So, with that being said, how do we enforce this within our city? Like I said before, we do it through our inspection progress. Um, we make sure that inspections are performed on any businesses within our city limits. We look for code violations on new constructions or any structure that is going through a major renovation. We do permit reviews to make sure that the suppression systems are in place. We do spot inspections on special events, for instance, like a concert, or say, we're in South Texas, so say the rodeo's coming, and we know that we're going to have a tremendous amount of occupants there. We're going to do an inspection on that facility to make sure that A, it can hold the amount of occupants that are going to be there, and B, that if something were to occur, they can safely exit the facility without incurring injury. We also do special inspections on places like bars and grills, things where we know the occupancy can sometimes be exceeded, simply because if you oversee the occupancy of that building, then that increases the probability that someone's going to get hurt. So what do we do specifically in Abilene with our jurisdiction to make sure that we are uh, enforcing that code? Well, we have divisions that, like I said, the fire marshal's office reviews the permits, the plans, any documents to ensure that when they're constructed or when they're renovated, these structures are, adhering to the codes. And what we've done specifically in this jurisdiction is we have adopted, um, excuse me, we've adopted the International Fire Code. And then we've incorporated local standards for our specific area of operation that has specific amendments to our city. Um, So, going from these codes and these standards, um, I'm sure that y'all have questions in your mind. Well, you're saying the international building code or the international fire code, you're talking about local amendments, and to us, you're speaking Greek. Okay, we're not in the fire department. We're not a firefighter. That is not our area of expertise. So when you utilize these codes that I'm talking to y'all about today as a baseline, as a standard, um, what are we doing with the codes um, to ensure that the structures that are being built are resistant? They're being constructed of the right materials. And what we're doing, guys, is um, we go through several things. We do not test these materials ourselves. We don't do that locally. Again, we go through the International Code Council. We go through organizations like the NFPA, Underwriters Laboratories. I'm sure y'all have all heard that or seen that on one of your extension cords at your home at some time. There, another one. And then there's a fourth one, which is the Southwest Research Institute. Those organizations are nationally accredited organizations which we utilize to develop testing methods to ensure that our materials that are constructing our buildings within our city are fire resistive. And that they are safe and that they're going to have a rating that's going to protect the occupants within that facility. So what kind of test? What kind of test? So there's two basic tests that these organizations do all the time, and they're through what we call the ASTM, and that stands for the American Society of Testing and Materials. And just about any type of component or structure that y'all may run into uh, utilizes the ASTM, or you might have heard of the ASME, which is also the Association of Mechanical Engineers. And they are delved in construction, maintenance, renovation. They have standards for all the industries, all the way down to oil and gas and chemical plants. They utilize one of these societies to do that. But they have two specific ones that we really focus on, and one is the E119, and I don't expect y'all to remember that, but basically they call that a fire resistant test. And what it does is it puts a full assembly, a wall, a flooring, part of a structure. It puts it within a closed burner, and then what it tests is it determines how long will it maintain its structural integrity, and how long will it contain the fire, prevent it from spreading. The other test that they use is through the American Society of Testing Materials, and it's called the E84. And what that does is that measures the combustibility, how quickly the flame's going to spread on that surface, and then it assigns it a rating. And so when we're going back into those inspections and we're looking at that engineering facet of fire prevention, and we're looking at the blueprints and we're determining if they meet the specifications in the code, that's where we're looking at. We're looking at these ratings. Is the material rated to properly contain that fire, to properly have that resistance, to prevent the spread of that fire, so that, again, the ultimate goal is to protect the occupants within that structure. Okay? Um, so once we do these tests, or the ASTM does them, or the ASME, or another organization like Underwriters Laboratories, once those tests are performed, how do we use that data? Does anybody have any idea? Because I'm throwing a lot at y'all right now, a lot of information to educate you, to make you aware, to explain the process a little bit. But how do we use that data for our fire test and our ratings to make sure that what the ratings are, what we're seeing when we're doing that inspection, is compliant with code, and that structure's has integrity and it is physically sound? Well, again, like I said, specifically here in Abilene, we use the International Fire Code, which we talked about. We use the NFPA, which stands for the National Fire Protection Agency Standards. And then we take that through our inspection process and we review plans, schematics, drawings, and we look at those components, which they're fire rated assemblies is what they are. That's your flooring, your walls. It's the actual components that build your structure, build your building, and we make sure that they're installed properly. Uh, they're maintained. They're not decayed. They're not degraded. They're sound. They're rated for the resistance that they say that they're rated for. Um, and then we look at other components too. I know that here, as we entered the building, y'all saw a fire door. You see those oftentimes at the exits at stairwells. Um, those are rated, that they're functioning. They say that you're not supposed to go through a fire door. It's for an emergency only. And the reason is they keep those doors in place because those doors are more resistant in your exits. They will retain, they will keep fire out from an adjacent structure or adjacent part of the building. So they want to make sure that, that those are only used for the purpose to exit the building to a safe location. But with that being said, we got to make sure that they're operational, that they close, that they latch, and a big one is that they're not obstructed. And for instance, right now, a lot of the hotels, if y'all have ever stayed or traveled or whatever, these codes that I'm talking about are specifically, that you've seen have extinguishers. The extinguishers have to be on every floor. They have to be within a certain distance for you to be able to get them. They have to be inspected. They have to be um, physically visible and available for you should you need them. You have to have exit signs, from each side of the floor that you may be on, and they have to be clearly lit up. If you lose power, you have to have lighting. You have to have an unobstructed path, which is your stairwell, exiting the building, and lighting on each of the landings as you depart down the building. And then you have to be able to get out, with the door opening out. So all those things are what they do when they rate and they inspect these buildings, and that's how they're using these tests and these codes to ensure that they're going to work. Again, like I said, I alluded to the fire extinguishers. They have to be the correct type for the fire, which is normally an ABC, which will deal with combustible or electrical fires that may be in the hotel. Another big one is we have to have access. In the fire department, I know y'all have all seen a lane that is provided for the fire department that's next to a hydrant, which provides the water source for the pumper truck, which allows us to actively work on extinguishing the fire depending on where it is and what's needed. So, I've given y'all a lot of information, so I'm going to also flip the script on you and tell you, does anybody know what we would consider an unsafe structure? Something that's not deemed fit, something that doesn't make it to the code, something that we would say needs repair because it cannot, have occupants within it. Okay, just to give you all a few, we talked about the assemblies and the structures that support our buildings. So any building that is severely damaged or the structural supports won't support the intended load cannot have occupants in it. You can't have walls that lean or buckle. You can't have blocked egress or exits or inadequate ones or unlit ones or anything that prevents you from safely exiting the structure, because that will affect a code and it will essentially not allow you to stay in the building. Um, you can't have missing or non-functional fire protection. As y'all have all stayed in hotels, I referred back to that earlier, even your building that we're having this discussion in today. You have to have active fire extinguishers. You have to have active smoke detectors, carbon monoxide detectors, the lighting, the sprinkler systems, all that has to be functioning properly in the structure, or cannot be in that structure. It cannot have occupants. Another big one that I will just allude to real quickly, and this is for personal as well as where you work. We have electrical fires all the times, and a lot of times it's because it is not wired properly. It is overloaded. It causes an arc, or it causes the circuit to catch on fire, or it's obstructed and people are unaware that the fire is occurring and it is spreading before it gets out of hand. So again, electrical hazards cannot be allow occupants, and lastly, exterior deficiencies will also cause you not to be in there. So if I were to ask y'all a question, there's different types of structures. What would you think was the most prevalent potential for a fire that can potentially spread? And I'll give y'all just a second. Yes, sir. Yes, ma'am. It's a good answer. Okay, a lot of us have standard homes. Some are brick, some are wood. The more combustible materials you have, the more confined space you have, the more ability that you put that fire load into that structure, the more prevalent it is to spread. So, for instance, right now, hotel structures like your WalMarts or your malls or whatever, they're built, of a concrete flooring foundation, structural steel that's treated. They're more resilient. What is more prevalent to a fire is, something that is made out of wood materials, apartment complex, something with a lot of vegetation around it. A facility that doesn't maintain the sanitary and has a lot of combustible papers and trashes and things of that nature that has the potential to catch fire, and due to the limited space between the units, it will spread from one to the other. Or something that has a shared attic space. If the fire starts in one building and it goes up and it's burning, then it will spread across that common space. So those are more prevalent to cause a out of control fire. Um, and then, like I said, lastly, it talks about why do we do this? Why do we have codes? Why do we have fire prevention? What is the end game? What is the ultimate thing? Why am I here trying to explain education? My intent today is not for funding. It's not to try and get a new program. It's to try and spread education and engage with y'all so y'all are aware of how important our position in the fire services is and the reasoning behind when we do inspections. And if we need something or a resource to help us do our job better to protect the well-being of our community and our city, that's the reason. If you don't know why we need something or requesting something, or you don't know why we have a fire prevention program, that is the reasoning behind it. It's to ensure that, when we build buildings, when we have renovations, when we have establishments, that we're conforming to these codes, we're adhering to them for public safety, for the well-being of you, for your families, to prevent a possible destruction of a business owner's establishment. And the big thing is by doing the inspections, by validating the type of materials that are within that structure, by ensuring that we're compliant with the codes, or that we uh, get compliance from the business owner or from the establishment owner, we're making sure that we have overall well-being for our community and within our society here in the city. And like I said, if we don't do these inspections and we don't enforce these codes and we don't have fire suppression and we don't have a fire prevention program, then we risk the liability of losing not only that establishment, but ultimately losing the life or lives of personnel within our city. So, with that being said, we'll take anybody's questions today. And I have pamphlets, I have brochures, I have more information, contact numbers, and I would be happy to answer any questions one on one if y'all do not feel like answering them at this time. So I thank you for your time. I appreciate you giving me some of your time today because I know we're all busy and we have schedules. And I hope this was educational to you and informative. And I hope it gives you a little bit better understanding of the importance of the fire services and what our goal is. And that's ultimately to protect our community. Thank you and have a good day.